Having licensed characters in games is cool, no matter how you spin it. Playing as Rambo, Leatherface, Scarface, or Alien in games that aren't even about those characters is just an interesting concept. Having cameos in gaming is great. Overlapping things that people enjoy can be a welcome surprise. I remember being a fan of The Walking Dead and seeing Michael Rooker in the Call of the Dead trailer for Black Ops Zombies. It's nice to see two things you enjoy connect and in a way that feels natural. Making games built around characters from properties outside of gaming will grow fan bases of beloved characters while also giving said characters limelight outside of their medium of origin. A prime example of this can be seen from the superhero genre of games. The Arkham series tells an original Batman story bringing characters from the DC universe to life in a different way than the comics, cartoons, and movies ever could. In a different way, not necessarily better than. In some ways, nothing can beat original comics. It just helps seeing characters in a different light while also being able to play as them. Do you ever want to feel
The exaggerated swagger of a black teen?
Gaming is a medium where you can sort of feel what it's like to be a character. In the recent Spider-Man games, you can swing through the city and face combat encounters to really feel Spider-Man's agility and speed. In the Arkham series, you can feel the punchiness of combat. Pun semi-intended. Both games focus the pacing of combat in a way that not only feels rewarding, but also plays in a way that the characters would fight. Smash Bros. Has a massive roster of characters who are already in the gaming space. However, that doesn't defeat the purpose of including these licensed characters. Just having them together in one form of officially licensed media connects fan bases. Before Smash, gamers could never really play as Bowser and fight alongside Link to beat Mario and Ganondorf. Smash has even evolved to where you can play as Steve, Banjo-Kazooie, Cloud, Snake, Sonic, and so much more. Multiverses switches things up and lets you officially able to play as Shaggy in his natural, lore-friendly state, limiting his power so he doesn't destroy the multiverse, something that the Scooby-Doo cartoon or movies could never fully explore. On a serious note, the Iron Giant fighting against Tom and Jerry's antics and being on a level playing field is something that only gaming can pull off reliably. Having a bunch of Marvel or DC characters on the same screen feels more natural in movies or comics because they have the same license holders and themes. Rick and Morty fighting Arya Stark from Game of Thrones can only really be done in gaming. That being said, as cool as it is for fans, licensing does suck at times. Whenever a game involves a license, there is always the potential of the agreement to use that license changing. Licensing agreements can change over time depending on the license holder. In some ways this can be good. Maybe a game performs well, so the rights holders of a character may want the developers to make more content for the game, or may extend the license. Maybe the license allows new skins to players at the discretion of the license holder. But there's no guarantee that licenses stay forever. Remember, nothing is guaranteed when it comes to using licenses. Agreements can expire, not be renewed, or can simply change. Games losing their licenses can do various things, each of which shows how licensing deals can get a bit sketchy. The best case scenario for losing control of a license is if a game is still playable and can still be bought, even if it can't receive any updates. This only applies to online games as far as I know, and I only have one example, which is the Friday the 13th game. Friday the 13th is in license limbo, if you will. The game can't get any updates because its developers do not really have the right to mess with the IP more than they already have. The game is still purchasable and playable at the moment, while sitting at an existing but super low player base. I'd recommend looking into the case if that interests you. It really shows how basing a game off of a huge IP can be extremely risky, especially if the license owner changes. Removing a DLC character due to its license agreement changing or expiring is the second worst thing that can happen with licenses, in my opinion. This means that the content is taken off the market, but is still playable for players who had previously bought it. If it's an online game, this allows other players to see their friends and opponents using unique cosmetics, or in cases, full-on characters from other IPs, which, as I previously mentioned, is pretty cool to see. Usually with additional content having a license expire, people will be notified if they are following the game, giving the player base ample time to acquire said content, which will usually end up on sale before it's gone. However, this can become an issue with buying things you don't need just because they are limited. This is called FOMO, or the fear of missing out, and it's not very good for consumers. This feeling can make people spend money when their heart's not in it, just so that they won't have to suffer from not having limited content. FOMO affects so much in gaming now, and it's unfortunate that licenses are a part of it, whether it's on purpose or not. Licenses that come in the form of DLC expiring is pretty bad. However, people can still play the game despite them missing some content. The worst thing that can happen with licensed content in gaming is the removal of a game from a marketplace. Unlike a DLC, games in their entirety are gone. If you still own the game, you can still play it. But even then, you can't convince people to buy the game simply because they can't buy it. At market value, that is. There might be key sellers or some sketchy eBay sales selling the game for a higher price. You know, supply and demand and all that. Licensed games can be pulled off of the market with little to no notice. Licenses expiring on a game and the game being pulled can make people miss out on a potential favorite game. Back when Blockbuster was a thing, I rented out Spider-Man Shattered Dimensions for the PS3 and really enjoyed it at the time. Sadly, that game can no longer be purchased from actual retailers and is no longer for sale. And now the only way I can experience that game again is through YouTube or through my friend's Steam account, neither of which would feel quite right. Or another way which would feel less right, but I won't get into that. Let's talk a little bit more about licensed DLCs, just because they're so prevalent now. Licensed DLCs, or any post-launch content for that matter, helps games grow. Yes, I know, most of the time, characters appearing in games is for the money. Pretty much everything is. But putting that aside, sometimes it's a good investment. Licensed characters can bring players back to the game, and can even increase player bases with new faces. Dead by Daylight is notable for this. Some of its largest jumps in its player base have been from new DLCs hitting the store, and with those DLCs, new playable killers and survivors from horror movies and IPs come to the game. I don't think that game would be where it is now if it didn't have licenses. The thing about Dead by Daylight and the licenses it's acquired is all of them fit the theme of the game. Some of them fit the game better than original characters that the developers have created, which is something I will not further elaborate on in this video. Similar to Dead by Daylight, Mortal Kombat included licenses in its DLCs. These characters don't fit Mortal Kombat to a T, but still feel like they belong even if they aren't martial artists. There's a way of doing licensed characters right, even if they don't fit the flavor of a game. If the developers take care with the characters and implement them into the game the right way, players will be happy and crossover between fan bases will be able to exist in a healthy state. Leatherface in both Dead by Daylight and Mortal Kombat are implemented in a way that is flavorful to the game. Each version of Leatherface is obviously different, but they both feel like Leatherface and control how he would if he got his own game. Well, I guess when he gets his own game now. The Demogorgon from Stranger Things kind of felt like a weird addition to Dead by Daylight when it was announced, and when it was revealed to come to the game, people were concerned with how its power would play and if it would be in flavor with the show. Thankfully, the developers of Dead by Daylight implemented the Demogorgon and its abilities extremely well into their game. The same thing goes for Alien in Mortal Kombat. I don't know about the community reception, but an alien, the alien, in a somewhat martial arts-based fighting game would feel weird, but the developers delivered despite the unique choice. Before I get into the next section, I just want to bring up Dead Cells. So far, Dead Cells has had 2 updates bringing in multiple IPs from the indie game sphere into their game. Both of these updates bring skins and items that reflect something that each included game has to offer. For indie game enjoyers like myself, this was a pleasure to see. Also, Dead Cells is getting a Castlevania DLC soon, which is looking to be an honorable spin on the IP. Castlevania as a franchise inspired so many new games and even created a new genre of games. And seeing Dead Cells, one of the more notable Metroidvania games of the past decade, collaborating with it is such a welcome sight. I'm gonna be honest here. If you're going to have a license in a game, make it fit. Make it big.
That's what she said!
The inclusion of a character shouldn't feel lazy. It should reflect the character. It's amazing how far gaming has come in general. Being able to see licensed characters in games is a blessing of the time, but this shouldn't be taken for granted. Making a licensed character just a skin for another character in a game can't be done in a way that pleases everyone. Yes, it does enable more licenses to be used in a game due to the lower effort needed on the developers to reskin an existing asset and see if it sells. But gaming, to an extent, should be about taking risks and not just going with what sells. Taking risks is not just including a skin and doing nothing with it to see if it sells. And it will sell, by the way. Taking risks is using the license in this arbitrary correct way. Billy the Puppet from Saw shouldn't play the exact same as everyone else in Call of Duty. It seems weird and off, and not in an ironic way like in multiverses. A puppet shouldn't be wielding a gun unless it's some awful shovelware horror game you find on Steam. Leatherface and Billy the Puppet in Call of Duty doesn't make sense. There's no flavor to it. If you've seen any movie with Leatherface, you'd know that his weapon of choice is a chainsaw. And I don't think he's ever shot a gun either. On the other hand, Amanda and Leatherface in Dead by Daylight make sense. Even Leatherface and Alien in Mortal Kombat makes sense. Alien in concept doesn't exactly fit the game, but the developers somehow made it work. Just throwing in a skin that changes nothing in a game does nothing for the community crossover that makes licenses and cameos so cool in the first place. If developers don't even bother implementing the characters the right way, what's the point other than to make easy money? I mean, I guess that's the point and has been the point for the entire time, but I don't care. If games keep going down this path, I'd rather have developers call these skins costumes instead of remotely marketing these simple reskins as new characters. If a game visibly tells me I'm a character, I should expect to be that character. If it looks like I'm wearing some bad Halloween costume off of Wish, then that's fine because I won't expect to play like that character. If developers don't want to put care into implementing licenses into their games following my arbitrary correct way, they should at least market the DLCs or updates like that at least, right? I hope you enjoyed the video. I didn't expect my last video to do as well as it did, by any means. I'm thankful for all of the views, comments, shares, likes, and new subscribers. That being said, if you like this type of content, I will be making more, so like, subscribe, comment, and all of that good old algorithm nonsense. I'm open to feedback and learning more about this whole video making and essay writing process, and all of everyone's comments so far have been helpful. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one, once I figure out the topic that is.